Hello, this is Required Fields, and in this video I'm going to discuss some more of the albums that I've been spinning as of late. And I'm going to start off this video with Chastain, The Voice of the Cult. This is the fourth Chastain studio album, released originally in 1988. The Voice of the Cult is definitely one of the best Chastain albums. This is the best tracks on here, and I would say it would be the title track, which opens up the album, and also like the songs "Share Yourself with Me" and "Soldiers of Flame." But there's no bad songs in the album whatsoever. "Live Hard," the second track, is another one of the highlights of the album. But if one liked what Chastain was doing in her albums prior to this, they'll also like this one. And but yes, I own all of the albums that Chastain released with Lever at the helm, The Voice of the Cult is one of the best ones. I'd say my favorite is probably Ruler of the Wasteland, but all the albums that Chastain did with Lever are worth owning. Although I actually don't own the 2017 version of We Bleed Metal, I own the 2015 version of it, but I really like the 2015 version. I look forward to hearing what Chastain come up with next. But this 1988 release, The Voice of the Cult, is definitely worth owning, and anyone who even has a vague interest in Chastain's music definitely needs to get it if they don't have it already. Next up is Cancer, The Sins of Mankind. Cancer are a British death metal band who released two albums prior to this, To the Gory End in 1990 and Death Shall Rise in 1991, the latter of which featured James Murphy on guitar. This is 1993 release. Sees the band going in a bit of still mainly death metal, but has a slight thrashier influence than the first two albums had. Some have called it death thrash, and I'm not sure I'd call it that. It's still more death metal, but I can hear some more thrashiness on it as well. And then in 1995, they released their fourth album, Black Faith, which got a lot of mixed reviews. Some people said it seemed to be like they were trying to tap into the fan base that Alice in Chains had, while still having as well as having some groove metal type elements. It was a very large departure from what the sound they had in their early 90s releases. But anyways, this is their third album, The Sins of Mankind, which is a very solid release, and definitely worth checking out if you're into the early 90s death metal scene. Then we have Pedro Botero. This is a Spanish band, and this is their 1987 self-titled debut. They released an album a couple of years later called Guerrero, which is also in a traditional heavy metal kind of vein. And then in the early 1990s, went for a more commercial hard rock type of sound. And some people have called their early 90s period AOR as well. They disbanded after the early 1990s, and have since reformed and even put out a new album, but I have not actually heard it, so I don't know if it's closer to the early albums that they put out back in the late 1980s, or if it's closer to their more AOR-inspired direction that they took later on. So I can't really tell you what direction it's in because I have not heard it. But they did, to celebrate the 30th anniversary of this album last year, release this 30th anniversary version of the self-titled debut. I'm not really sure exactly what band I'd say these guys sound exactly like, but it's a good release. I'd say that, there's some NWOBHM band influences, although this is a 1987 release, but I can hear some people who are into another Spanish-speaking band, Baron Rojo, would like this. Not just because of the language factor, the fact that they speak the same language, but I can hear fans of one band liking the other regardless. But my favorite tracks on here are the second track, Sangre, the third track, Soledad, and the fourth track, Dama de la Oscuridad. The second, third, and fourth tracks, although pretty much the whole album is enjoyable. Anyways, yeah, so that's Pedro Botero. That's their 1987 self-titled debut. Then we have Dominant, The Summoning. This is a 2018 release and was actually the first album I actually bought of it that was released in 2018. It was released on New Year's Day, according to Metal Archives, Encyclopedia Metallum, the Metal Archives. And anyways, this is a death metal band. This is their debut EP, The Summoning. And anyways, Dominant is a band that plays death metal for sure. I'm not sure exactly what type of death metal style you'd say. It has some technical elements, but I'm not so sure I describe it as technical death metal. It has maybe a little bit of brutal death metal influence, but it would be a major stretch to call brutal death metal at the same time. And it's definitely more rooted in a more new school, like a 21st century batch of death metal bands than it is the old school batch of death metal bands such as Death and Benediction, although there are plenty of bands that are actually in the new old school wave, such as Gruesome, who I absolutely love, Skeletal Remains, and Cyst. And Cyst being another band that actually put out an EP in January that is guaranteed to make the my top 10 list of 2018 once the year ends. And well, Dominant, we'll have to wait and see if it makes that one there, but it's definitely one of the ones that could very easily make the list. It's a very enjoyable EP, and I look forward to hearing their full length when it drops. And finally, we have Sickening Gore. This is an album called Destructive Reality, and this is the first, last, and only Sickening Gore release. They disbanded after this. Very much in the old school death metal realm. This is originally released back in the early 1990s, but the band never recorded a follow-up album. So if one is into the Florida death metal bands of the early 1990s, you should definitely get some enjoyment out of Destructive Reality, the lone release by Sickening Gore. And anyways, so that's just a handful of the albums that I've been listening to as of late, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And this is Required Field signing off, and goodbye.